Ms. Jones, we want to welcome you to the committee. We're very sorry for the ordeal that you have experienced, and we are impressed by the courage and integrity you have to come here today and tell us about it. So welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I want to thank you for having me here as well. I went to the Green Zone in Baghdad, Iraq on July 25, 2005 in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Halliburton, my employer, prior to leaving the U.S., promised me that I would live in a trailer equipped to house 2 women with a shared bathroom. Upon arrival at Camp Hope, I was assigned to a predominantly all-male barrack. I complained about my living conditions to Halliburton management and asked to be moved into my promised living quarters. These repeated requests were denied. On the 4th day in Iraq, I noticed the woman I was replacing and several others were outside. They called me over and invited me to come sit with them. When I did, I was offered a drink. The men, identified only as Halliburton firefighters, told me that one of them could make a good drink, so I accepted. When he handed it to me, he told me, "Don't worry, I saved all my roofies for Dubai," or words very similar to that. I thought that he was joking and felt safe with my coworkers since we were all on the same team. I took 2 sips from the drink. When I woke the next morning, I was extremely sore between my legs and in my chest. I was groggy and confused. I went to the restroom, and while there I realized that I had bruises between my legs and on my wrists. I was bleeding between my legs. When I returned to my room, a man was lying in the bottom bunk of my bed. I asked him if he had sex with me, and he said that he did. I asked if it had been protected, and he said no. I still felt the effects of the drug from the drink and was now very upset at the confirmation of my rape. I dressed and left for help. I reported this incident to operations coordinator, who took me to the KBR clinic. The clinic then called KBR security, who took me to the Army hospital. There, the Army doctor Jody Schultz performed a rape kit. Dr. Schultz confirmed that I had been penetrated both vaginally and anally and that I was quite torn up down there. She indicated that based upon the physical damage to my genitalia that it was apparent that I had been raped. I watched her give my rape kit to the KBR security personnel as I was again turned over to these men. KBR security took me to a container and imprisoned me. 2 armed guards were stationed outside my door. I was placed inside and not allowed to leave. I asked for a phone to contact my father, and that was denied. I was not provided food or drink. I begged one of the guards to let me use a phone until he finally shared a cell phone with me so that I could call my father back in Texas. My father then contacted my congressman, Ted Poe. Congressman Poe took actions to get me out of Iraq. That is when the State Department officials came to my rescue. I was later interviewed by Halliburton supervisors, and it was made clear to me that I had essentially 2 choices: stay and get over it, or go home with no guarantee of a job, either in Iraq or back in Houston. Because of the severity of my injuries, I elected to go home despite the obvious termination. Once I returned home, I sought medical attention for both psychiatric and physical evaluation. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. Due to the pain in my chest, I went to several surgeons, and each discovered that my breasts were disfigured and my pectoral muscles had been torn. This injury required me to have a reconstructive surgery. I turned to the civil court for justice, in part because the criminal courts have failed to even file an indictment at this point. Currently, there are approximately 180,000 military contractors in Iraq. Approximately 20,000 of those contractors are females. 50% of all Americans on military bases in Iraq are contractors. Contractors have been immune from both Iraqi law and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. There has not been a single complete prosecution of a criminal contractor to date. When I decided to pursue a civil suit, I was informed that my bulky employment contract included an arbitration clause. I learned that I had signed away my right to a public trial and justice. When there are no laws to protect Army contractors who are working abroad, what is to stop these people from taking law into their own hands? The arena harbors a sense of lawlessness. Victims of crime perpetrated by employees of taxpayer-funded government contractors in Iraq deserve the same standard of treatment and protection governed by the same laws whether they are working in U.S. or abroad. Army contracting corporations harbor and ignore criminal activities in Iraq, which under the arbitration clause protects them and doesn't hold corporate accountability when a crime has been committed. My case wasn't an isolated incident. Since no actions of law could help other victims at this point, I started the Jamie Lee Foundation. To date, 38 women have come forward through my foundation, A number of them shared their tragedies in confidence because they were silenced by provisions of their arbitration agreements. Unfortunately, arbitration is stacked in favor of business, making it harder for individuals to prevail in a dispute, and that is not just and unfair to the patriotic, hardworking employees. How can this country not protect us contractors who have left our families to help our country in an effort to build democracy overseas when we are victimized criminally? Originally, this was a controlled way to expedite resolution of disputes, but that's not the situation now, and it is imperative the system be revised. My goal is to ensure all American civilians who become victims of violent crimes while abroad have the right to justice before a judge and jury.